Hey guys, Loomis here, and we are back with our next Ancient Call video here, and we're going to do a guide to Fenrir, the wolf boss today. So, his kit is very straightforward, but before we get into his attacks, I want to discuss his special ability here. So, at the end of every turn, he will stack one unit of the Terror debuff on you. Now, this is important to note, because if you get 3 stacks of Terror, your AoE damage taken will skyrocket, and you will get insta-gibbed, so that's very important to remember. And this debuff is actually undispellable with a major exception that we'll get to later. Now, why does it matter that your AoE damage taken will go up? Well, because all of his attacks are AoEs. So, the first attack he has is just a map-wide magic AoE that will add stacks of terror. The second is a map-wide physical AoE. So, he will do back-to-back AoEs, and it's important to note that the physical damage one is twice as strong because a lot of the units that are good for this fight are of the magical variety, and they don't necessarily have the most physical bulk, so just something to keep in mind. Now, for his third skill, he actually has 2 different ones, depending on what the map looks like. So the first one is, if there are no wolves on the map, he'll summon 2 wolves. Now, these wolves are just regular mobs that are much weaker than Fenrir, and they do attack immediately, and basically they have 3 move, and they do like a swords dance type AoE. It does do 1 stack of terror, so they're not super strong in the beginning, but just something to remember at the beginning of the fight. And then the second one is that if there are wolves on the map, he will consume 1 and give himself a major damage buff. Now, the buff cannot be dispelled unless you kill him, so, 200 damage is a lot, so, you just want to make sure that you kill the mobs as fast as possible, and before he moves so he can't eat them. Otherwise, you'll find yourself in, kind of a problem situation. And at the beginning of every turn, Fenrir will cleanse all debuffs that he has on him. So let's say you rack up, all these debuffs on Fenrir, he's going to cleanse them. So just something to remember. Now, the map in itself is very peculiar. And you'll see here that we have 4 colorful nodes here. So the map quirk is called Blessing of the Gods. And the different effects happen when you step on respective map nodes here, and you can only step on them to get the effect once Fenrir has a certain amount of debuffs active on him. Now, on odd phases, he needs 4 debuffs, and on even phases, he needs 6. So, whenever you step on these nodes after he has enough debuffs on him, they will heal all your players back to full, which is important to note because you don't necessarily actually need a healer for this fight. He will remove all stacks of terror, so this is the major exception that I mentioned earlier in the video, that this is the only way that you can cleanse yourself of terror. He will deactivate all blessing squares, so you can't step on multiple at once, you can only have the 1 blessing at a time. And then he's going to grant a special ability depending on the node. So the red node here will increase your fixed damage by either 400% on odd phases or 500% on even phases, and that's what the slash means. So on the other ones, the slash is just denoting what the boost is on the respective phase. The purple one increases your AoE damage. The green one increases your magic damage dealt. And the yellow increases physical damage dealt. Now, the numbers are a little bit murky on exactly what the buff is for green and yellow, so I think it's like 30% on the odd phases, and it's not clear what it is on even phases, but it will increase the damage dealt. So the top 2 squares will spawn wolf mobs. So if you set on the fixed damage or AoE damage spawns, 2 wolves will show up. So that's important to note, especially if it's on before turn 3 there, because you're going to have to kill them before he eats one and, skyrockets his damage. But the bottom 2 will increase the respective damage taken. So if you step on the magic damage dealt node, you are going to increase the magic damage you take. So you want to make sure that you step on these nodes in terms of timing it with what attack the boss Fenrir is at. Because if you step on the wrong node at the wrong time, you might be boosting the amount of damage you take and you could kill your own unit. So that's pretty much it for Fenrir. It's a very straightforward fight. In my opinion, it's actually probably the easiest fight out of the 5 because you have these buff squares that can skyrocket your damage. So Fenrir should be a very little trouble to most players. Now, in terms of unit selection, the 2 factions that give 100% boosted stats are going to be the Dark faction and the Mythical Realm faction. So, in terms of the units you're going to want to bring 2 debuffers. Now, the reason you want to bring debuffers is so that you activate the Blessing of the Gods squares. That sounds very obvious. So the basically when you move your team, the first units you're going to move are the debuffers, so you can slap on the debuffs to Fenrir. And then basically the rest of the team is all going to be DPSs. I mean, you could bring a third debuffer if your first two debuffers don't provide enough debuffs on even phases, because 4 debuffs should be pretty easy to hit. 6 might be troublesome, so you might need 3 debuffers, but generally you want to try to keep it to 2 units and then the rest just be DPS. So the move order is you're going to want to move your debuffers first, then you're going to want to attack, and then you're going to want to have your a unit step on one of the buff squares to heal back your team before you get into the enemy phase. And then the buff, let's say you step on the AoE tile, you're going to want that buff will still apply next turn because all your units have moved. So in terms of debuffers, the best debuffer and the unit that trivializes this fight absolutely the most is Jubler. Now, in terms of skills, you're going to want to bring Battle Cry, Defense Intimidate, and Beast Shock. Beast Shock just so, you can do a little bit extra damage. So, Jubler eliminates further the need for a healer, because if you're stepping on the Blessing Square and you heal up to max and then you get hit by an AoE, Jubler's talent will heal your units. So, you really don't need a healer, which is really, really great because it lets you focus on other things like DPS. He's going to want to run Hellhounds, and he can provide 3 debuffs very easily. Now, the 3 debuffs he's going to provide are Attack Defense through his passives, and then the damage taken increase through the Hellhounds. And he can only get that when he attacks. So, you're going to be hitting the boss with Jubler, going to hit 3 debuffs, and, you're nearly the way there on odd phases, and you're already halfway there on even phases, which is great. So, in terms of equipment, you're going to want to run Oath, Last Rites, his helmet, and then in terms of accessory, like Blood Pact is probably the best because it gives him the most HP. But if you have Jubler up for PvP, you don't necessarily have to change his whatever accessory you're running on him. The accessory is, more or less negligible. But if you're going for min-maxing, Blood Pact's easily the best. And for obvious reasons, you want the Last Rites because damage reduction in Ancient Call is probably the most important stat you have. So that's how you would outfit Jubler. Now, the next debuffer you're going to want to bring is Burn. So Burn, his skill loadout will look like Hegemony, Swords Dance, and Rupture. Now, he is going to run Lava Titans. And the great thing about Lava Titans is that if you have multiple people with Lava Titans, those debuffs actually stack on top of each other. So you can get, let's say you run 2 units with Lava Titans, you can get 2 HP reduction debuffs onto an opponent, which is great. So, that's the one debuff that will actually duplicatively stack. So he can do 2 debuffs a turn, 1 from Hegemony because it drops the defense, and 1 from the Lava Titans, 3 if you use a Swords Dance, because that gets the anti-heal. Now, I should mention that if you're running Jubler with Bernhardt, this will actually, so you get the 3 from Jubler, the defense down stacks on top. We already have the defense intimidate, so it will be 4 debuffs total, not 5, but it will be 5 if you use Swords Dance. And then if you equip him with the Ghost Blade or the Demon Slayer, if you can crit, you can potentially get another debuff depending on what you roll. So that's an interesting way to get another debuff from Bernhardt. And obviously his talent is very helpful for bossing because it lowers attack and defense. So in terms of equipment, Burn actually has a ton of choices. So I actually would say Demon Slayer is his best sword to run because it gives him attack, 8% attack, and it gives the extra chance to provide a debuff. Now, Blood Sword is good because there is the fixed damage node. And because it's not an HP percentage fixed damage hit, it will still hit, so that's a good one. Current Vitter or Balance Blade can be an option just due to the fact that, if the mobs are close by and you want a Swords Dance, maybe you'll be able to sweep them into the AoE radius and save yourself a turn from not having to use another unit to kill them. And then Graham, because it gives you attack and HP. So if you don't have any of the AoE type swords, I just go with Dragon Slayer Graham. Now, it might sound weird, but I have Arcane Battle Garb as the highest because none of the HP, the heavy armor choices really are particularly great over another in this fight. So Battle Garb at the very least gives you a fixed damage proc after attacking. So it's something. And because you do have the Wolf Mob's Bloodline is a good pick too, because they will attack you potentially physically. So if they're surviving for 2 turns, because they're going to move in, they're going to use their AOE, and then if they single target attack you after, Bloodline works there. So Aeneas and Chief's Helmet, because they give 10% HP. And then in terms of an accessory, give him something that increases attack, so that's why I have Judge and Slayers there. Now, the interesting thing with Apex Boots is that it gives him enough move, if you put him on the left side, to move up towards the fixed damage tile. So if you want to mix it up, because I would generally recommend that you abuse the AoE tile, but if you ever want to use the fixed damage tile, it's actually something that Burn can reach, only with Apex Boots. So just a consideration that you might want to run Apex Boots on him if you're going to use the fixed damage tile. Now the third debuffer is going to be Listel. And on Listel, I'd recommend you broadly bring Bloody Deluge, Blood Dance, and Mind Bore. So very important. Only run Blood Dance if you have a Bracer or Swordsmith emblem, because otherwise she is going to be hitting herself for a lot of damage, and it makes no sense. So you're going to want to have the immune fix on yourself if you're going to run that. You can definitely replace Seal, you can replace Blood Dance or Bloody Deluge with Seal to give another chance at a debuff. Because, Bloody Deluge, if you have Jubler, you probably don't need the extra healing, because Bloody Deluge will heal the party. But if your healing output's high enough, then you can definitely replace it with Seal, or if you don't have a Swordsmith, don't run Blood Dance. So, depending on what kit you run her with, she can provide up to 2 to 4 debuffs a turn. And one other skill you might want to bring, actually, is the Reaper's Touch, because it's undispellable, so Fenrir can't cleanse it when he cleanses debuffs, because it's an undispellable. So that can be a way for you to start with 1 extra debuff on a turn where you normally start with 0. So just an interesting tech there. She's also going to run Lava Titans, so those will stack on top of each other, which is great. And then in terms of equipment, Oath of Justice for obvious reasons. Last Wraith is going to be better than Tenios due to the damage reduction. Njord's is great for her. She can also run Tenios to help, potentially buff the team, or Charon to... Charon, though, is... If you're running Jubler with Hellhounds, it's obsolete. So, if you have the Hellhounds, don't feel like you need to run a Charon on anyone. So I'm just keeping it there because it's a great pick if you don't have the Hellhounds, but if you do, it doesn't make any sense. Then, Swordsmith, I think, is the best for Listel here. Blood Pack would be great for her as well because it increases their HP. Now, I have Eye of the Beholder here, which sounds like a little bit of a weird choice, but it does give flat magic defense, and it provides a potential other debuff that will debuff the damage given on the boss, so a 50% chance of that. So it's something. I don't know if I would necessarily recommend it, but it's definitely an option. And then another debuff choice we have is Almeida. So if you're going to use Almeida, I would say run Heal, Ultimate Equip Tornado. A huge drawback is that she can't control what the debuffs are. Obviously, if she uses Tornado, that's going to be an attack debuff, but between her talent and Ultimate Equip, you might be duplicatively stacking a debuff you already have on Fenrir, and that doesn't count. So let's say he already has his attack down from Jubler, and you use Tornado, you're not getting 2 debuffs out of that. So she has a ton of overlap with what her debuffs are, so it makes her a little bit of a choice. I would run Meditation over Heal if you do have it, because the healing output should be good enough. And I would put Mist Dances on her just for the chance at getting another debuff proc, potentially. In terms of equipment, it's basically just, regular holy unit attacking stuff. Gift of Eternal Life gives her some, utility. Dimensional Jewel should hopefully help keep the cooldowns lower. I think Almeida is a very, very poor choice for this. So, if you only have 2 debuffers total and she's one of them, bring her. But if you have 2 out of the 3 other options, I would definitely bring those over Almeida. She's quite underwhelming in my opinion for this. So next we have the DPS. So the most important DPS in my opinion to bring is actually Varna. And I would run on her Aim with the 2 AoE skills. She has 1,000 Arrows and Wind Whisper. Now, aim, she is the optimal unit to move towards the blessing tiles because she can move back. She has high move with her on her dragon, 5 move, 7 effective range with aim. She can use aim on the blessing square and then move back in 1,000 arrows. So she can buff the team and attack in the same turn, which is a huge point in her favor. Her talent also helps increase entire team's DPS, because if you're utilizing the AoE square, her talent can give 20% AoE damage up at 6 stars, which is huge. It makes your team do a ton more damage. So she helps buff the entire team, and that she's basically, you know, the best support unit imaginable for this fight. And unless the only reason you wouldn't run Varna is because you don't have her. She is as close to a must-bring unit there is for a specific AC fight as possible. So in terms of equipment, I would run Throne Guardian on her just for extra bulk. I mean, you could definitely run. Actually, no, I'd just run Throne Guardian because she's only going to be AoEing. She's never going to attack single target. So, you know, Peacemaker or one of the fixed damage axes are just not going to be useful for her. Then Last Rites, for obvious reasons, King's Crown to buff the team further, and then either Slayers or Judge just to get her attack up even more. Next DPS is Bosal. And you're going to notice a trend that a lot of the DPS options are going to be AoE characters, because the AoE tile gives such a significant damage boost. So for Bosal, we're going to be bringing Black Hole, Earthquake, and Seal. Now, for this fight, he is a DPS, he's not a debuffer. So, you know, unless you don't have any of the debuff units, you're going to want to save Bosal to DPS for you, because he although he can debuff, he has a ton of sources. His DPS is just so strong in this fight that it's just better if you think of him as a DPS. He's also a good unit to run towards the Blessing Square when Varna's aim's down, so Varna can't run to the square every turn. So Bosal, you know, especially when he has boots on, is a unit that has enough mobility to run around, and he's very good for that. And I would highly recommend that you run Clock on all the AoE units for obvious reasons, because the lower your CDs are, the more AoEs you can rip, the more damage you do. And then in terms of equipment, it's going to be the Miracle Staff is easily the best staff because it increases the AoE damage. I would recommend Galaxy Cloak over Baldur's just because it does have the extra HP attached to it. So for a fight like this, that's worth more than having the 20% chance at Match GMB. And then the same thing with like Dark Crown over Soul Stealer. The extra 5% HP is nice, so that's why I'm rating it higher there. And then Veil of Light is for max DPS, but Speed Boost works as well. Alright, next DPS we have is Lana. And Lana, I would recommend that we run Lightning, Black Hole, and Heaven's Sanction. Now, Lightning because the mobs are cavalry class, so you get super effective damage on them. And Heavens is very useful for sniping the mobs. So the mobs are also, I mean, the damage buff, you know, with AoE, it's to all the enemies, so it's against both Fenrir and the mobs. So Heavens can be very useful for sniping them and not getting out of range and stuff, so that's excellent. And then in terms of equipment, I would just keep her regular stuff. You know, you've built her a certain way if you're going to run her a Needhog that, you know, I would just recommend keeping it that way. Now, obviously, Astaroth is not as good for AoEs, so Red Moon would be slightly better here, but, I mean, I think specializing a different weapon just for Lana here might be too much. Although, if you do have, like, a Red Moon on your Rachel, I would consider slapping that on her instead of Astaroth here, and so on. So the next DPS we have is Ren. And Ren, I would recommend you bring Annihilation, Shadow Spear, and Fireball. Now, the one cost skill does not matter for Ren here because she does not have Lightning. And you could bring Decay or Calamity Throw instead of Shadow Spear. I'm not fully sold on Shadow Spear. And Clock is by far the best enchant for her as well, even though she is a little bit more single target on this. And the reason is because Annihilation. You're going to have enough debuffs on Fenrir that Annihilation will always work. And if you can drop his magic defense down to 0, and I think on this fight it goes down to like 40 or something, it doesn't go straight to 0 for whatever reason. But if you can drop his match defense, you can increase the rest of your team's DPS by a significant amount. So you want to use Annihilation as much as possible. and I think Ren's actually an incredibly good unit for this fight. And then in terms of equipment, I mean, she wants a rune staff, which is nice. For her, Astaroth obviously works as well. If you don't have either, you can use the Red Moon, and then the rest are just, general mage recommendations I have for Ancient Call. So the next DPS we have is Altamila here, and I guess I would recommend that he would run Dragon Breath, Gale, and Raging Thunder. Now, potential hot take, I find Altamila incredibly underwhelming for this fight. And I know that on the tier list that we have from CN and stuff, that he is brought very often to Fenrir, but I mean, the more I look into it, the less I understand why. And at this point, I really think it just has to do with the fact that you already have him built up for Sleipnir, so you might as well bring him. But, his kit for this, it's just not good, especially compared to other units. If you have good RNG, you can deal up to 3 debuffs, but, you have other units to debuff. So, I mean, in terms of equipment, the potential 3 debuffs are going to come from, if he uses Dragon Breath, there's the 1. If he procs Peacemaker, that's potentially 2, and if he procs Jormungandr's Eye, that's potentially 3. So, I mean, a good part for Alti this fight is he is very bulky, so he'll survive a long time. But, I mean, that's really the only thing he's bringing to the table, in my opinion. Now, you'll notice that I have a regular Crown as behind J.I. and King's Crown. Just because, the buffs he has on this fight, you get Wind Ride from Dragon's Breath and Raging Thunder. And, having Wind Ride for an extra turn is nice. But, to be honest, I'd prefer to get another potential debuff if you need it. Or just the damage buff from King's Crown. So, honestly, if you have a built Altamila, feel free to bring him here, but, I would not try to go out of my way to squeeze him into a Fenrir team, to be honest. And then the more I've thought about this, the less I understand why he's used so much. Alright, next we have Jizzaroth, and I would recommend that you bring Lightning, Thunderstorm, and then the white Dragon. I can't remember what the third skill is called, but whatever that one's called, the line AoE, that's good against cavalry. So I find Jizzaroth's actually a very underrated option for this fight, because he can bring 3 options that are super effective against the mobs, and obviously he has 2 AoEs, which is going to be good against Fenrir here. And in addition, you could bring Swan Song instead of one of the AoEs, and it's very interesting for this fight because one of the aspects of Swan Song is because if you kill someone, your cooldowns go down by 1. So because we have the mobs that pop up, you can kill them and proc a cooldown. So obviously the stats from the faction buff do not apply here because it is a Ancient Call fight, and the 100% stat boost, it replaces that. But the special effect of Swan Song could actually do something interesting on this fight. And then obviously as you die, and you provide cooldowns, I don't know. I just think Jizzaroth has a lot of very interesting text that he can use on this fight. And then in terms of equipment, because this is AoE, I would recommend this, general AoE setup for, any AoE mage here. Now, next, I have Lambda. And Lambda, I would say bring Freeze Strike, Thunderstorm, and Ice Missile. Ice Missile is purely just because it has a lower cooldown. And Lambda shows up on 0 tier lists, mostly because I think people don't have it invested in her a ton. But if you do have her invested, I think she can provide a lot of damage in this fight, and she's a very underrated option because of that. And again, just a general AoE mage get up for her. Now, the next option I want to talk about is actually Yulia. And Yulia, I would bring both of her 5-cost mega attacks and Faith. Now, the big problem with Yulia is that she's a poor fit for the AoE strat. So if you're going for the AoE buff square, she doesn't have any AoEs that are going to help here. So it does suck there. But she is a great fit if you're going to use the plus magic damage node. That is viable to do. You have a ton of mages here, so that is a strategy you can do. And if you're going to do that strategy, Yulia becomes a little bit more attractive. Yulia has a pretty standard, AC recommendation set. I'd only bring Yulia if you don't have the other AoE units built, but you have Yulia built for some reason. I think she's a pretty low tier option for this, if I'm being completely honest. And then the last one is an interesting pick because I'm not going to necessarily call her either a debuffer or a DPS, but it's actually Sophia, and I would run heal, light, thunderstorm, and rewind, and it's obviously just for rewind. AoEs, as everyone knows, have very high cooldowns, and rewind helps with that significantly. And Thunderstorm actually does make her somewhat useful with, the AoE strat, so that's something. And additionally, she does have the Shrine Maiden, so she's very tanky. She's going to survive a lot longer than you might think, so she's actually a very interesting pick for this, especially if you need a 6th. And then, because of the Thunderstorm and stuff, and I would recommend, she's not healing this fight, so, bring things on her that will help her damage. She's not a healer. So you're only bringing heal on her because her other 1-cost skills just don't make sense for this fight, and it does give you the ability to heal if you really need it, but Sophia by far and large is not going to be really healing on this fight. So those are the units that I would potentially recommend bringing to Fenrir. So, and as far as my team goes, the units I'm going to be bringing, I'm definitely going to bring Jubler, and in my opinion, Jubler he just makes this fight so much easier. And if you have him built, he's an absolute no-brainer to bring. I'm going to bring Bernhardt and Listel. So between these 3 units, I'll definitely get all the debuffs I need. I'll bring Varna because I think Varna is absolutely critical for Fenrir. I'll bring Bosal, and I'll bring Lana. So I would bring Ren over either Listel or Lana if I had a Ren. However, the game was not kind to me. So Ren, I think, is a clear upgrade over at least one of these units, especially Lana in particular. I think I'd probably drop Lana for Ren. So if you do have a Ren, I would highly recommend bringing her because, Annihilation's so good, and you can see how many magic units we have here. So that will help superpower your magic attacks there. So that's it for the video today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate the views and the support. If you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Hit the notification bell so you can find out when the next Ancient Call video comes out. And as always, if you have any questions, if you have any discussion points, if you have anything else you want to know about the Fenrir fight, please let me know in the comments below. I try to stay engaged down there, so feel free to ask away. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again later.